Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Volker Friedrich. I'm the founding partner and managing director of GBP International. We are a project and management consulting company based in Kuala Lumpur, and we cover Asia Pacific for European customers. Today, in our series of interviews, I have the pleasure to speak with the Ambassador of Germany in Malaysia, Dr. Peter Blomeyer. Thank you very much for joining me today, and welcome to our discussion.
Thank you.
Mr. Blomeyer, I was researching your curriculum vitae, and I found it very interesting that your first post was actually in Japan after you joined the Foreign Office. And so somehow it's a closing circle going back to Asia. And in between, I read you have been in African countries, but also back in Germany every now and then. So how is your perception? How is your relation to Asia in general? Because I didn't see anything about Southeast Asia in your vitae. So what made you choose Malaysia as your new destination?
Well, thank you very much for inviting me here. I'm very happy to be here with you here. I have seen some of the interviews you have conducted here, so I'm happy to contribute to this. Yes, Malaysia actually was the #1 on my application list for the Foreign Office, and I was very satisfied to be sent here. The reason is that in my perception, Malaysia is a country distinguished by its diversity. This is true for nature. As you know, for instance, the north of Borneo is one of the 5 mega centers of biodiversity on our planet. But it is also true for peoples, for religions, for cultures, and even for the political system. And Malaysia was, from her early days, exposed to influences from countries outside, from India, starting with India, then when it was China, it was the Islamic world. Also in colonial times, it was Europe. And still it has also preserved some own distinctive futures, and I'm just fascinated by this diversity, and also, of course, by Malaysia's exotic and somewhat mysterious appeal: the tropical climate and nature, plants and animals, smells and sounds, kitchen and clothes. And yeah, that was the reason why I applied for this country. And it is, if I may add this, it is also quite different from Japan, my first Asian posting. Now I'm up to exploring what are the features of Malaysia and what are the differences also to Japan.
Yeah, well, I can only congratulate you, and I enjoy and I like Malaysia now for more than 20 years, personally as well as in business. And I can only underwrite what you have said. It's a fascinating country. From a German perspective, I would say it's one of the hidden gems of Southeast Asia. And if you speak in Germany with German people, there are hardly any people who know about Malaysia. People know Thailand and Singapore, but Malaysia has a little bit, I feel, a PR issue, a perception issue. You only read about Malaysia if there's any bad news happening every now and then. And I think it's very timely that there is a new drive, a new force with you leading the embassy to bring Malaysia into the news in a positive way. And there are so many interesting things happening in Malaysia. So
yeah, thank you. I very much agree with this. I think that the knowledge in Germany of Malaysia is limited, and it is indeed connected to things like the perception of Israel in Malaysia. That is one feature, or another feature is the LGBTI issue. But this is in a strange contrast also to people like you who have known Malaysia for a long time. Also the Germans I meet here in the country who have known Malaysia for a long time, they appreciate the country and all the positive aspects which should be made better known in Germany. But vice versa, it's also the knowledge in Malaysia about Germany is also limited. Now they admire our cars or technique and or industry, and but the whole colorful picture of Germany, I think, is not very present here too. And it's of course our job in the embassy to convey this in both directions.
Very true. I mean, the most Malaysians know is the Oktoberfest and the Mercedes car, and in the early days, Michael Schumacher and Franz Beckenbauer, and then you have a big gap, you know. But let's talk about the present situation in Malaysia, but also in the region. Malaysia, everybody knows, or hopefully knows, that is part of the ASEAN group, the 10 Southeast Asian nations, which are often compared to the European Union as a trading bloc, as a political union. And the ASEAN countries have been in a bit of struggle, you know, in terms of how open are they going to be, how democratic they want to be, trade issues, customs and tariffs issues. Now we have the conflict in Myanmar, which is hot on the agenda, and the countries and the leaderships are struggling basically whether they want to condemn it and openly say, look, this is not the right thing to do, or whether they say, like China does, look, this is an internal affair, we are not mixing up with it. Can you make a statement about the state of affairs now of ASEAN and how Germany is looking at the ASEAN Union?
Mm-hmm. Yes, well, I think we first need to see that ASEAN member states have quite diverse political systems. There are republics, there are monarchies, one-party systems, systems with military predominance. Malaysia is a democracy, and as such, a frontrunner of the values spelled out in the ASEAN Charter of democracy, rule of law, human rights. And I think Malaysia pretty much lived up to these values when confronted with a military coup in Myanmar. When that happened, quickly the principle of non-intervention, which is also enshrined in the ASEAN Charter, was juxtaposed to the principles of democracy and rule of law. And Malaysia has very openly defended these latter principles, which is democracy and rule of law. Prime Minister made it clear already on his visit to Jakarta at the beginning that he saw in the coup a setback for the development of the Burmese democracy, and the Malaysian government denounced the violence committed against peaceful demonstrators by the military. You know, ASEAN member states, in our view, rightfully proclaim ASEAN centrality for this region. But we need to see this also comes with responsibility. Malaysia is very well aware of this and knows that ASEAN is now called for in finding solutions to this deadlock in Myanmar. And ASEAN is challenged to prove her ability to solve conflicts in her own ranks within her member states. And Malaysia has tabled proposals in the foreign ministers' meetings 2 weeks ago. And I hope that they will be taken up by the ASEAN community and that we see some follow-up. Yeah. Maybe I can just add one more point, which has, I cannot conceal it, has also resulted in some disappointment. And that is the decision of the Malaysian government to go ahead with the deportation of 1,086 Burmese citizens. It was about 3 weeks ago. And we believe that it was not the right time to send these people back home, as this could be also regarded as a form of cooperation with the military regime of Myanmar and as a first step back to normal. And there shouldn't be a back to normal right now. At least UNHCR should have been granted access to the persons involved as to ensure that no vulnerable people or people possibly exposed to prosecution in Myanmar would be deported. But all in all, I think that Malaysia has played a very positive role in this conflict.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, Malaysia is a balancing factor within ASEAN and with all the different directions of, let's say, political maneuvering, Malaysia always has been regarded as a very balanced system. And let's hope that we can all see a solution in the next couple of months, hopefully. I'm not so optimistic, to be honest. I've been to Myanmar a few times, and I think it will stay for a while until we see any kind of real democratic move there. But let's say change subjects. We will not change Myanmar today in our interview, but I thank you very much for your open and critical remarks. Let's look at the, let's say, the German, Malaysian and German ASEAN relations. And we know that Southeast Asia is not the big attraction to German industry. If you talk about Asia, everybody says China, China, China. But now we see a little bit of, I call it rebalancing, because China is getting more costly. We have seen the regional comprehensive economic partnership agreement recently. So we see some companies looking more favorable to ASEAN compared to China. What is your view on that one? Did you receive any visitors, or did you see announcement of new investments coming into Malaysia stroke ASEAN? And what is your feeling about the German industry, particularly the small and medium-sized companies? Obviously, we have the big players like Siemens, BASF in Malaysia for decades, if not centuries. But I always see that the governments want to push the Mittelstand more towards Asia, and that is an uphill climb. I can tell you that from my experience.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, I cannot yet receive visitors because there is a very limited access to Malaysia at the moment, and you yourself couldn't come and meet me personally up to now, so I still have to wait for that. I think that we now all live in a time where companies are realigning and setting up new supply chains, where they are considering where to go with their investments, and Malaysia is quite aware of it. We have in Malaysia more than 700 German companies operating, and Germany is the #1 trading partner of Malaysia within the European Union. Vice versa, Malaysia is neck and neck with Vietnam and Singapore. One has to say Germany's most important trading partner within ASEAN. German companies usually, when they are here, they engage substantially with investments, but also by generating employment and vocational training in Malaysia, which is very much appreciated. So our economic relations are, one can say, excellent. Having said that, we cannot deny that there are some clouds at the horizon. This is true for the macroeconomic level, but also for the nitty-gritty of companies. FDI in Malaysia has decreased, and this has been the case already before the pandemic. Malaysia's economic performance has also decreased, stronger than was expected last year by 5.6%. And then of course, revenue went down also. The revenue expectations for this year seem a bit high to us, and we see also government spending has increased, so we do not know where we are heading on microeconomic level. Then another factor which is worrying is the political stability. That was once, until shortly, one can say, an asset of Malaysia. But it is viewed critically now also by companies, last not least, because there is now this state of emergency. It's a health emergency, but still it's an emergency. And then there's a number of dysfunctionalities. It's the dependence of the state on revenues from oil and gas. It's corruption, it's government-linked companies suffocating private companies. It's the Bumiputra policy. And then on the small level German companies, they complain about red tape, about difficulties to find sufficient workforce, about continuous limitations of the presence of managers in the office. I think there are only 1/3 is allowed to be in the office at one time because of the pandemic. So there are a number of problems which they are facing, and yes, but then you also need to see there are also some positive elements. And in our view, in the view of our embassy, Malaysia continues to be, despite all these clouds, continues to be a good investment location. It is committed to free trade and a rule-based international order, which is not true for all countries in the region. Then it is strategically excellent located in the growth market Southeast Asia. It has a good infrastructure. Much of the labor force is well educated and commands English. And also important, Malaysia, for instance, allows foreign companies to acquire real estate. But I think the most important factor is the overall environment, which is friendly to companies. And this is the impression which I have gained in my first contacts to ministers. Ministers and high-ranking officials, they listen to us. They listen to the concerns of our companies. They are also willing to change decisions they have already taken if they see that this is not the right way. I could give you examples for that. And they are aware also of the need in this specific situation after the pandemic to attract foreign companies. So after all, I'm still optimistic for Malaysia, and they have also they have also succeeded in attracting some business from China.
Yeah, I can't agree more with you, and you really have given, let's say, the Malaysia investment speech, so to say. We all know the let's say the positives of Malaysia, and we have seen dozens of companies coming in the last 20 years. And I personally don't know any company which has invested in Malaysia, which after, let's say, 3-5 years has said, no, that was not the right decision. I pack my bags and I go home, or I go to another company. All the companies who have started, they are more or less successful, and they reinvest and they expand their production. So yes, Malaysia is a good place to invest. But the COVID scenario we have now, I think, like in any other countries, look at Germany, is like a catalyst, and all the hidden problems, so to say, under the surface, they really pop up now. And you have named a few already. And I think it's a wake-up call also for the Malaysian institutions in general, that they have to be more flexible, more investor-friendly, adjust and change some of the settings the companies are facing. And I'm sure you, with your team at the embassy and all the other players in supporting investments in Malaysia, are there to help and support and guide companies who are calling on you. So
yeah, that's you just gave a job description of our embassy. We try to support our German companies whenever they need help. We are there for them, and when it comes to when they encounter difficulties with Malaysian authorities, be it with customs or with other legal issues. We also support them in their bids and tenders, which is important. We flank them politically. So yes, we try to foster economic relations and to ease the way of our companies here.
Yeah, on that note, it's very interesting that you mentioned that. I'd like to ask you a little bit of a critical question, if I may. And over the time, I think you are ambassador number 7 or 8. I happen to know in my time in Malaysia. And the embassy is always telling that kind of story, how they are happy to help, and they do, no question. But especially the smaller companies who want to sell, let's say, a machine for, let's say, 500,000 euro. How can the embassy help in their business? And I understand if there's a big tender for, let's say, building new ships in a marine shipyard, or building a power plant or a new petrochemical plant, there are, they say, big questions where the embassy needs to work with the ministries and support companies like BASF or Siemens or Mercedes. But if you have the small Mittelständler, so to say, the family company who wants to sell a machine or who wants to invest, let's say, 100,000 euro in a joint venture, where and how is the embassy in that small little operation?
Yeah, well, we are here for all companies. We are not here only for the big companies. We are also for the big companies, but we are also for the small companies. We at the embassy, we are well aware that the backbone of our economy is the small and medium-sized companies, and we are ready to help them also. We have a division of labor with the chamber. This is true. The chamber helps in B2B affairs. Then when it comes to finding companies, Malaysian companies to cooperate with, then we say please turn to the chamber, because that's their original business and that's their job description, and we are not entitled to mess around there, even though we have a very close cooperation with the chamber, I should say. Yeah. But as for contacts with ministries, obtaining licenses or dealing with red tape or whatever, then they can come to us, and we do our best to help them. We are of course also limited in terms of personnel, but we take up each and every case which is brought to us. We also help if smaller companies run into trouble here, which we have once in a while. And there, I would like also to use this interview as an occasion to advise that they come to us in time. Don't wait until, as we say in German, the child is fallen down, and we need to be involved at a stage where our help is still possible. Yeah. So, but yes, we are very happy to facilitate contacts to ministries and the authorities here, and we do have the contacts to do so.
Yeah, very good. And I would also, in future, when I have a customer with problems, I did so in the past, when there is an issue where I think the embassy is helpful, I will not hesitate to come to you and together with our clients. And
please do.
Just for the record, you mentioned the Chamber of Commerce. They are our good friends and partners as well. But for the companies who are watching us, there are also private consulting companies who do the same service as the Chamber does. So it's a free market, and may the best man win, so to say.
Not comment that.
Very good. Okay, we are coming to the end of our interview, and as in the last section of our talk, I would like to ask you. Every ambassador has put certain emphasis on certain sector. Obviously, the economic cooperation is, let's say, the backbone of the relation, but we have cultural issues, we have language issues, we have education issues. Do you have you set yourself an agenda, or did you think about where you want to put your emphasis in your work in the next 4 years, I assume?
Yeah, well, you mentioned just the economic relations, and I think that has been a clear priority of our embassy, and this will continue to be a clear priority. And I think that it is important to preserve the basis of our relation. Having said that, which is economy. Having said that, I think that we also need to build up political relations, which sort of lagged behind the economic relations. Bring more politicians to Malaysia, German politicians, and to forge contacts between them and the Malaysians. You, at the beginning of our conversation, you mentioned that we do not know enough from each other. So I think that we need to foster that. Also, what you said, culture, language, is important. We want to present the whole colorful picture of Germany, culture-wise, to the Malaysian side. But if I may point out one field which is also very dear to me, it's the environment. I think that we should reflect how we can support Malaysia in coping with challenges which also are of a global nature, and that is the preservation of her unique biodiversity. It is the protection of air, water, and soil. It is the avoidance of plastic. It is the fight against climate change, to which Malaysia has also subscribed. These are really big topics. And one could also add the pandemic, the cooperation and health issues is also something we should reflect that. And if I shall say what is our job, it is to identify these tasks and to bring together the actors on all these fields, on both sides.
Yeah.
But I have also some instructions from Berlin, of course, and I have to say that all our work has now to fit into our efforts, our regional efforts to enlarge and diversify our relations to the Indo-Pacific, to Malaysia, to Southeast Asia, to the Indo-Pacific. And the German government has issued her Indo-Pacific guidelines last year. And they spell out the whole multitude of global, of regional, of national challenges, which is strengthening cooperation in the field of multilateralism, peace and security, rule of law and human rights, what we talked about, rule-based and sustainable free trade, connectivity, digitalization, culture, education, and science, all these things. And what we want to do is we want to fathom out the potential for cooperation in all these fields, and then we will see where we can advance and where we can find new priorities and new fields of cooperation. Yeah. So it's also a sort of discovery, a new discovery for me as a newcomer here of Malaysia, and I'm very much looking forward to do this.
Yeah, excellent, and thank you for mentioning this new, let's say, strategy paper of the German government about the Indo-Pacific relation. If I read that, I think you have to hire 100 people in the embassy if you need to match all these tasks. And certainly it will not be boring for you in the next couple of years. And I think it's interesting and also very much needed that there is a cooperation between the private sector like us with the government institutions. And I think this interview is a good start to get to know each other better. And I certainly will continue to be in touch with you, report about our problems we are facing, not only in Malaysia, but in the region. And I think it's about learning from each other. And that is my and our philosophy. And I think it was very insightful today to speak with you. Thank you very much again. I wish you and your family a very good and interesting time in Malaysia. And I hope that the COVID restrictions will be lifted very soon so that you can also move around freely and meet the very nice people of Malaysia and enjoy the food and everything else Malaysia has to offer. So thank you very much again today. Greetings to Kuala Lumpur, to all your colleagues in the embassy. And I hope to meet you soon in person. You have the last word.
Well, thank you very much for this opportunity to talk to you and also to introduce myself to your audience. And I hope to see you soon here. And I also hope to see lots of other Germans from all fields, which we just discussed, to intensify relations with Malaysia. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.